Welcome to a very special episode of the Wealth Amplifier podcast. I feel like sitcoms in the 80s used to say that you don't want to miss this special episode. But the reason I'm calling it a special episode is this is our 10th episode. We have made it to double digits on our podcast. I'm Matt Liebman. Joining me, I won't say as always, but as often, is Aaron Marks. And also joining is Patrick Swift. Pat, I see something on the board in the background there. We'll get to that a little bit later. So for this podcast today, just the three of us, no outside guests. And as I mentioned at the outset, this is our 10th podcast. So we wanted to have a little bit of a brief conversation about the podcast, not to be too self-referential, and see why we started this, if it's meeting our needs, some feedback we've gotten from clients, and where we want to take this thing going forward. So Pat, why don't we start with you? What did you first think when we said, hey, we're going to do a podcast at the new firm?
I mean, I love the idea. And I remember pretty vividly, like we were sitting at the old office probably 3 to 4 months after we had launched the firm and just sitting around a round table. And I think the idea had already been incepted into our minds, but we were like trying to figure out what the podcast was going to be. And I think all of us had this sort of aha moment. We were like, well, we think at least maybe from a bias standpoint that we have good conversations and we're just sitting around talking about stuff, markets, planning concepts, strategy, whatever. We were like, why don't we just make that a concept? And I think it's evolved from there. But I remember that. I remember just sitting in your office around a round table, literally, talking about what the podcast should be. And like Aaron, I think you mentioned kind of like a Seinfeld podcast, like a podcast about nothing, but that's what people are entertained by sometimes. So
yeah, I think when we first started, and we still do want to have the amplifying a topic, but I think from feedback we've gotten is most people just like the kind of the casual back and forth and getting to know us better and what our opinions are on things. So it's starting to evolve, which is cool.
Yeah.
I remember when Aaron, when you and I went up to meet with Dynasty Financial Partners, who is the firm that, as many of you know, helped us and still helps us in our journey to independence. We were talking to their marketing team. And just to level set for the listeners, when you work as an employee at a big firm, which we did prior to 2.5 years ago, the idea of having a podcast, like, you might as well say that you're also going to like join the NBA. Like, it's just like we couldn't even put out any of our own videos, everything. And I'm not blaming the old firm. It's just, they have rules, they have whatever. They had 16,000 advisors around the country. So then we start our own firm, and Dynasty is this whole marketing team. And like, you can put out whatever content you want. And I remember saying in that meeting, like, well, what about a podcast? And they said, why not? And I think that was the first time it was mentioned. But the original idea, at least that I had, which we still have done sort of, but we wanted to kind of get our legs under us here a little bit first, was to have a lot of guests on from our network, because we have these conversations with interesting people, be they clients or not. And thus far, I think we've only had 3 guests because we wanted to make sure we had some semblance of what we were doing. And one of them was my dad, so I don't know if that even counts as a full guest. And then Megan Cross and Megan Breeden, and Jason Granite. But yeah, I do think let's talk about going forward. I think we're going to have a lot more guests going forward. We have a whole lineup of who we want. But Pat, you want to tease any or give any sneak previews on thoughts on that?
Sure. And I guess by the count of this being the 10th episode, 30%, 3 out of the 10, not bad. Not
fair.
Quite halfway, but 30%
Yeah,
of
number
our
1
episodes
doesn't count because it's your first, and number 10 is the 10th that, so really it's only 8.
Right. We're reflecting now. So yeah, I think our ratio has been pretty good.
And not to take the other side too much, but 2 out of the 3 were related to me of the guests. So I don't know how that factors in. But
well, like you said, we want to get our feet under us first.
Yeah.
Sure, I'll tease some. I mean, we've obviously hopefully gotten a little better at doing this across the board over the last year. We have sort of decided that, to Matt's point, there's a lot of interesting people we talk to that are both clients or affiliate firms or professionals we speak with on behalf of clients. So we're likely going to add some folks, interview some folks that we hold in high regard that often advise our clients in conjunction with us, whether it's on estate and legal matters, tax planning matters, some folks that we interact with almost on a daily basis and some of our clients are interacting with too, because we think they have just excellent perspective. And we think the podcast is a great medium to bring that information to everyone. So that's a couple teases.
I think also, we all the guests thus far and the ones that we've got in mind are somehow related to our industry, but I think getting some outsiders, just interesting people, that'll be a neat addition as well, which we do plan on doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for whatever, you're exactly right, Aaron, and that is something I think we will when we move to the next 10, we will start to introduce, because part of our job is not just to talk to people in our industry, but to your point, we talk to a lot of interesting people in a lot of different areas of life. Popped into my head once, I don't know if they would even be willing to discuss this, but like, we talk to a lot of doctors, bring on a surgeon and wonder what's really going through their mind when they're in there, doing their thing. I feel like that is kind of interesting. Not everybody's going to find every episode interesting, but we've gotten some pretty good feedback. I think one of the general ideas behind how we approach media and content and so on in the independent world is, can we reach our clients and prospective clients in new ways, like Pat mentioned earlier? And I'll speak to our quarterly investment videos, which are a little different than this. I've had several clients tell me that they're very helpful because now it makes the conversation when we actually speak a lot more efficient. We don't need to go through, oh, there's something going on in the world. What does Matt think about that? What does Amplius think about that? I already know because I watched your video, and now we can talk about me, meaning me, the client, not me, Matt. And so I kind of view this in the same light. If we can shed light, amplify a topic that someone has been thinking about in an efficient way, I think that that is productive, and it's also not a selfless endeavor. We have had people very easily forward our podcast onto others, and that can lead to new business and so on. So it's not entirely a selfless endeavor, but hopefully the listeners are getting as much out of it as we are.
Just on that topic, if you're going to pick a surgeon, a financial advisor, or whatever to work with, you want to make sure that interests align just with the type of person they are. And I think you start to get insight into who we are, on the back quarter of this podcast, when we talk about books and movies and the articles, just getting our perspective on life. You really work with people that are like yourself a lot of times. So now you can say, well, I don't like their opinion on their books and movies, so I'm going to go elsewhere. Or, you know what, I really connect. And I think my other friend will connect. So, hey, why don't you listen and put you guys together?
Yeah. Well, I do think there's good diversity here from the standpoint on those topics, in that at least for I'd say 70% of our clients are between Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, I would guess. So we did include a Giants fan, Pat, on the podcast, just so all the non-Eagles fans out there are still willing to work with us and so on.
That's the only reason I started working with you guys, so that all my clients in the New Jersey areas and New York areas, or I'm sorry, in the Philadelphia area, I should say, would be willing to work with me. So,
and and anything else on the podcast front, or should we move to a couple of our evergreen features, including Aaron reading some headlines for some reactions?
Well, Pat, you had some statistics on the podcast. How about that?
Yeah, sure. So, obviously, or I shouldn't say obviously, but we're pretty sure most of our listeners for the podcast to date have been our existing clients, which is, to what Matt was saying, part of our efforts here is to provide some content that clients are able to access anytime. It's informative, it's helpful, it's evergreen in some cases, it applies to multiple situations. But for the first time ever, we sent out a client survey. So the same people who are listening to this hopefully filled that out. And we were just trying to figure out how much traction the podcast was actually getting. So we just asked pretty plainly, do you listen to the podcast? Do you not? Do you even know it exists? We had some pretty split responses. Luckily, the majority do listen and are aware, obviously, that the podcast exists, but about half either don't listen or have no idea that it exists. So with this being the episode of reflections, I think internally what we're trying to do is like, how do we make people more aware? How do we provide more content that's meeting people where they are and what they want to be hearing? So I think this sort of 10th episode suss out it's a good topic, but I don't know, Aaron, Matt, what are your guys' thoughts on how we can boost the numbers from, about half of our clients listen to the podcast actively today, and we want it to be closer to 100% if possible? Like, what other stuff should we be thinking about, talking about?
Well, I think first things first, I think we were at the beginning, we weren't sure how long this was going to last. And I don't want to reflect now like we've done this for 50 years. We've done it for 1 year. But, we weren't exactly promoting this a lot. We weren't amplifying it, to use the term. But I think we can do a little bit of a better job of that. I think more guests on, because they probably hear our voices enough. I know one area we have upgraded is our technology. We all have cameras and microphones. I remember the first or second video we did pre-podcast, post-launch. A friend of mine who happens to be a client sent an email. He said, "Good content on your video. I know you guys are new, but can you all throw some money in the hat and buy a damn camera? Because you look ridiculous." I was like, "Okay, fine, thanks." So we've stepped that up a little bit. But I don't know, Aaron, if you have more thoughts on what we can do to amplify this more beyond just having more guests and more interesting topics.
It'll naturally evolve, but what you hope is that we're at 20 and 30 and 40, and you look back at 1 to 10, you can say, man, we've come a long way in the technology, right? You've got some new bells and whistles and features and cutaways, and we can take clips out and post them on LinkedIn and Instagram for people to quickly digest. So I think that'll be neat, just to evolve the professional nature of what we're doing.
Yeah, I'd agree. I think we hopefully are getting better too with our cadence and the way we're able to deliver messages in a context or a medium like this. So I think it's exciting. I think we are capitalizing and executing on some of the goals we laid out for it, which is like getting good information out to people, whether it's been through interviews or it's just us talking about specific topics. Like I think we'll just continue to get better at that. And if we're able to market it better and blast it out and amplify it even more, then hopefully we get more traction for everybody. But I guess on that point, like, as we've said a million times, we're an open book. So reach out to us with like, hey, we'd love to hear more current event topics. We'd love to hear more on what you think about, broader planning capability, whatever the case is. We're always open to changing strategy, changing course.
Well, and I guess just to tease one more episode before we shift to Aaron's headlines, Pat, we should tell them about what we are likely doing for episode 11.
Yeah, true. Episode 11. So, all right. So background on that is there's a big industry conference. I think is this the second one?
Second year.
Second annual.
Yeah. Second annual.
The name of the conference is called Future Proof. It's out in California. It's the second weekend of September this year. Matt and I will both be attending. Matt's going to be a featured speaker at a couple events, which is really cool for us as a firm. And we're going to plan to do a podcast on site there. And we may, depending on the sequence of things, try and get a couple of interviews because there's going to be a variety of really interesting people, both in our industry and outside of our industry, attending the conference. So our hope is that we get some connections that are awesome and we can add to the podcast. And at the very least, Matt and I can provide some cool perspective on the in and outs of the conference itself. But Matt, feel free to add to any of that.
No, yeah, the conference, which actually they call a festival, not a conference,
right,
which there's food trucks, musical acts. I think it's targeting, if I had to guess, an age demographic a little closer to Pat's than mine. But as Pat mentioned, I am Cheryl Penny, who's the CEO of Dynasty, is hosting a panel and asked me to be on his panel with them. So I did not pass up the trip to Huntington Beach. So I will do that. But it apparently got rave reviews last year, both in the industry and out, and a lot of financial media there as well. So we'll see. But we figured we would use this as an opportunity to do our first on location podcast.
Yeah, it should be awesome. And look, just to set the table here too, as a firm, Matt, including you, we're a very young firm from an advisor average age standpoint. So I think we're right in the wheelhouse of cool, cutting edge, trending festivals. So don't sell yourself short.
Well, I will say my daughter wants to get me a new pair of stylish sneakers, and she actually said to me last night, "You have to wear them to the office and show Pat."
Nice.
So
Not me?
Nice.
Come on.
I love that.
I mean, I don't know, Aaron. She
I
she
agree. I
sees
think
Pat as the stylish one. I don't know.
She's our chief fashion officer.
I'm not offended.
Let her know that. Yeah.
So should we get to the still yet to be? There's a goal in the next 10 episodes. We need a name for our next segment on the news articles.
Yeah. Yeah. True.
So all right, you want to jump into it?
Sure.
Aaron's amplifications. Let's go.
There you go. So I've got 3. 2 are finance related. Just interested in getting your perspective. The third is not. And here is where you really get into the insight. So what kind of person and people that we are. So I'll tease that and I'll leave it for the third. So first, Michael Burry of The Big Short. Big Short fame just bet $1.6 billion on a stock market crash. What do you think about that?
How many times has he done that since '08 and been wrong? That's what I'd love to know.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this. I think maybe on the behavioral finance episode or one of them, but the general idea of what Pat just said, that once you're bearish once and right in a loud way, which Michael Burry was. I mean, he crushed the financial crisis and made a fortune. There's sometimes, and I'm not saying he's doing this. I don't know the guy. I actually, other than reading The Big Short, I don't really know much about him. But there tends to be a tendency of those people to sort of try to recreate the big call again. And he could be right. There are some risks out there right now. Valuations are a bit stretched. Interest rates are higher, and so on. And I haven't read his whole thesis, but you're right. It does seem like these people get reputations as sort of perma bears, which I don't even know if that's fair to him. But yeah, I imagine this is not his first negative call since the '08 crisis.
Yeah, and he's I have a lot of respect for him. I think the book itself did a great job portraying him and his personality. But yeah, I mean, I was just doing a quick search while you brought it up, Aaron. He was talking about recession predictions in January earlier this year. Look, we're only 8 months past that, so sure, we could still have a recession, but I just think, just reiterating Matt's point, anytime a person who really has a loud call that went right for them, the media gives them a ton of attention anytime they fart, excuse my French, and it just becomes like this big thing that we're all supposed to pay attention to. So all respect to Michael Burry, but I guess I don't really care about his current opinion.
Well said, guys. All right, on to number 2. So the fact that this has to do with a golf company is irrelevant. And for those of you who know, I like to golf. If you're watching on YouTube, you can see all the golf balls behind me. But okay, so I've not heard of this company, so maybe I'm not that big of a golfer. But the maker of a $400 golf putter, they just IPO'd. And this is this article was on the second day of being public. So it says maker of $400 golf putter tumbles after surging 624% in the stock's debut. And the tumble was 85%. So IPO'd around $4 a share, up 624%, down 85%.
Wait, so I don't have to do the quick math. Where is it priced right now?
Well, I didn't tell you there's an additional 15% drop. Nope, 20% drop now since the beginning of the IPO. So it is now below the IPO price.
So it is below the IPO price. Got it.
Yeah. So there's that.
When did it go public, Aaron?
3 days ago. Today, so up 624%, down 85, down 20.
Wow. I think with IPOs, it's interesting, and it's not something, as any of the listeners know, I'm not a big individual stock guy, and the IPO world is sort of the height of the individual stock, because you're buying a stock with really no publicly available information of no, or at least no research reports generally until they, until they're out there for a little bit. But I think sometimes what's lost on people on the IPO, because I think it started probably a lot towards the 90s where you had all these hot tech IPOs that people wanted in on, is that the people in effect, when someone is going public, they are selling a piece of their business. So you're essentially saying, I'm going to buy from the people that know more about the company than I do. Now, there have been like a lot of the greatest companies in the world, they all had to IPO at some point. And so it's not like I'm saying that no IPO could ever be great, because there have been many that have been fantastic for both the company and the shareholder. But I always have a little bit of trepidation around that point of, wait a second, the people that know the most about this are selling. Why am I buying?
That's a good point.
we already referenced what pops into my mind is we already referenced The Big Short in the last article, but now it's sort of Wolf of Wall Street side. Like, look, I'm not implying any wrongdoings here, but how did it get so high and drop so fast? Like, who was pushing this and what happened? And it's got to be some story there behind the scenes.
Yeah. Well, I think, like, on Matt's point, not to speculate on that specifically, but if any of you guys do, feel free. But with an IPO, it's easy to forget if you're a retail investor, someone who's, not working for an investment bank and understands the process. Like, it's easy to forget they're trying to sell something to you, which is exactly what the IPO is. So they're trying to raise capital for themselves at the highest possible price, the existing owners of the company, that is, and sell something to you. So to see this with like a golf company, having no knowledge of their balance sheet and sales performance and all that kind of stuff, it seems like the timing's right. Like, golf has taken off in a huge way since COVID. It's the middle of the summertime. Like, if you're going to launch a golf company in the public markets, like, now is probably the time to do it, which is, again, they're trying to sell you something. So to have a whole bunch of volatility surrounding the IPO, it makes, I guess, procedural sense to me, if that makes sense, just on a high level. But I can't speak to obviously the mechanics of what may have gone on.
And did you say the IPO, like the initial IPO price, was $4 a share?
Somewhere, reading the article here, that eliminated most of Tuesday's rally that pushed the stock up 624% from the $4 initial offering price.
That's such an oddly low target price for an IPO. I feel like, I mean, it used to be that institutions couldn't even buy things below $5. I don't know if that's still, often the case. Anyway, interesting. I'd not even heard of it.
All right. Insight into your soul now. And I've sort of been debating on what I think your guys' opinions will be here. But as we said to the listeners, you're going to get to know that the people that you work with and listen to. So from the Wall Street Journal, is reclining your airplane seat upright behavior or downright rude? Etiquette around tipping back as flyers on edge. And in quote, you're not the chair lean back police, end quote. So on an airplane, do you put your seat back or not? And what do you think about the person in front of you putting their seat back?
Go ahead, Pat.
I think, like a lot of things, or I'd like to hope, I have a nuanced opinion on this as well. When someone in front of me leans their chair back, I think there's an immediate like, oh, like, what a jerk. Like, feeling I get like defensive, but that washes over very quickly because I am, at the end of the day, a believer in the chair pushback on an airplane. I usually do it. I in fact, I try to be courteous in general in public situations. So I always like test the waters with it a little bit. It's funny because, like, when you push it back, it can go back like a total of like 2 inches, it feels like, maybe at most. So I might go back like 1 inch and just like see if there's any like murmuring behind me of like hatred. And then maybe like a half hour later, I'll go the full length. And I'm always surprised at how short it goes, which makes me come back to where like I'm fully just a believer in doing it, because like it barely goes back. So if the airplane's allowing it, there's a reason why they only give you like 2 inches to work with, because that is, I guess, in theory, supposed to allow comfort still for all parties. So, I don't know. I'm cool
Matt,
with
it. Are you a lean backer?
I am not a recliner. I'm not a wonderful flyer to begin with, but they've made the seats so close together, I almost don't even see the point to reclining now. And then when someone reclines into me, I feel like I get a very like sarcastic self-conversation. Like it's almost like someone like accelerating and passing you on the road just to like slam on the brakes at a red light. It's like, congratulations, you got there a second before me. Like, and so it's like, congratulations, you got your extra inch of leg room. Like none of us have any leg room here. We're like, so what's the point? But
Right.
but I myself am not a recliner.
So I'm more like Pat. If you just sort of like shuffle and move a little bit in your chair, it moves. So I try to think that, can I disguise the lean back?
So you like dance around in your chair?
Yeah. So I move around a little bit and I put it back like an inch.
Wow.
And then
you disguise your recline.
Yeah, because I don't want the person behind me to be.
It's a little
I don't want them
diabolical.
to even know. So I just
Might be
creep back
genius. Might be the
slowly.
best possible move, actually.
Yeah, I might try that.
There's a
You're
comedian.
maintaining your courteous behavior, but like you're subtly getting what you want.
Yeah. I don't want to offend them, but I still want to be comfortable. It makes me think of, I forget what comedian it was, but if you're ever sitting there and all of a sudden you fly back, it's because the person behind you is standing up and they grab your chair. So like, you ever feel that one? And you're like, what?
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen that.
Fling back forward.
I've got definitely stronger feelings on that. I try never to grab somebody's chair, even if I'm losing balance. I'll look for the
100%.
like, cupboards or whatever. When people like grab my chair, I hope that they're like unable to walk or something because it's obnoxious.
I don't think people realize that they're just complete flimsy.
That's what's insane. So that's a real insight into somebody's soul, because like, where's your self-awareness there? Like if you're just ripping down the aisle, grabbing people's chairs, you might be a psychopath.
Well, they're the people that just, as soon as you can recline, they hit that button and jam it back.
Yeah, that's true.
The feet grabbers as well.
They're probably the same people that stand up as soon as the airplane.
Oh, that's a whole other topic.
Yeah. Oh, don't get me started on those people.
Yeah, that's
a
whole other
trigger
topic
for my claustrophobia. I do not like that. You sit in your seat and you don't get up until I get up.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, well, those are my three articles for today.
All right. So as our closing segment, we always just wanted to share whether it's a article, TV show, book, movie, something that we are watching, reading, whatever that we think may be of some interest. So, Aaron, you want to start there?
Yeah, probably most of you can guess that some of the TV shows we like from previous conversations, but Billions is back for those of you who are watchers of it. I don't know what season it is, but just watch the first episode. It only comes out once a week, so I have to suffer through waiting the entire week for the next episode. But without any spoilers, it's a little contrived. Like you sort of see a lot of things coming at this point, but good to see it back.
And Axe is back now, right? I haven't watched. Axe is back. All right. Maybe I've been gone for a couple of seasons. Maybe I'll come back. Pat, what do you got?
I'm in the same boat as you on Billions. I'm a couple seasons behind, but plan to get up at some point. So I mentioned this to Aaron on the golf course on Monday. We were doing a charity golf event for a client, which was excellent. Shout out to the client who invited us. What We Do in the Shadows, it's a comedy on Hulu. It's like 20, 30-minute episodes. If you're a fan of, which I'm usually not in terms of like priority, not that I don't like them, but if you're a fan of just like funny, mindless TV shows, which a lot of people are, this is right up your alley. It's about a bunch of vampires living in modern day Staten Island. And it just follows their ridiculous vampire lives. And it's hilarious. It's a little bit like The Office, because they have like a camera crew following them around in like a fictional but real life way, and they acknowledge the cameras and stuff. So if you're a fan of The Office or any kind of mindless, funny show like that, you'll love it. It's hilarious. I've been binging it pretty much every night.
Wow. I mean, mindless comedy is right up my alley, so I will have to check it out.
Yeah.
I'll go with a book because it's summer, and in theory, it usually takes me a full 3 months to read a book by the time I actually focus and do it. But in our world, behavioral finance and so on, there's a very well-known thinker, reader, writer, Morgan Housel, who wrote he's written a number of books, but his main his biggest one, as far as I know, is The Psychology of Money, which was an excellent book. And actually, my soon-to-be 15-year-old son read it when he was like 12 or 13 and thought it was great. So I got another book he wrote. I think it's something called like Little Rules About Big Things. but it's basically a bunch of short essays. And I just think he's a really interesting thinker. I mean, sometimes it's a bizarre thing to like read someone who's like almost job is to be a thinker. It feels like, that's not a very pragmatic thing, but he happens to nail it. And I find his opinions and perspectives on things interesting. So and it works for me because I can read like one or two at a time and then go do something else. So that's what I've been reading recently.
I just saw this morning on Instagram, Facebook, a quote from Morgan Housel. I wonder if it was from this book.
Yeah, it could be. He also has another new book out now that I'm not even up to yet. But he's going to be at our festival next month, right, Pat? I think he's one of the guests.
Yeah, I was about to say that he's definitely highlighted on my agenda. That'd be cool. Maybe I would imagine he probably has a lot of media attention, but maybe if we're really cool, we like rub elbows with him at happy hour and be like, "Hey, Morgan, like we got this cool podcast, get him on." That'd be something.
That's a goal. If we can pull off getting Morgan Housel on the podcast, that would be that would be something.
All right, so then all of our guests and everyone who's listening can hold us accountable for if the next 5 episodes don't include Morgan Housel. You know that Matt and I are bad cocktail minglers, and we're not any good at getting people to come on the podcast.
I can already share that I'm pretty lousy at that, so you might have to pull this off for us.
All right. Well, I'm not great either, but we'll see. Maybe the universe will align.
All right, so we're going to wrap up this episode. Again, thanks for tuning in to as many as you have to this point. And next episode will be in September on location in California.
Thanks, everybody.
All right. See you guys.